Good evening, primetime partiers. It's primetime party time. Welcome back, all friends to the show. Welcome also to any newcomers to our 1 hour of all things media and entertainment, live on the air at 9 p.m. at ptptshow.com and on your time, wherever you stream podcasts. Tonight, we are revisiting, reliving, and analyzing another cult-followed show, Chuck, in our recurring segment, Ghosts of Primetime's Past. My name's Tracy, and this is
Daniel. Hello, good evening. How you doing, Tracy?
I know, it's a lovely rainy evening down in SoCal. Perfect time to get all cozy and give our toasts and roasts of this past week before diving into our favorite and most memorable moments from Chuck. So, yeah, thanks for everyone for being here tonight. How you doing, Daniel?
I am doing well on this rainy evening. Actually, that is my toast tonight. If we're going to get right into it. Also, hello, listeners. Listeners chat.
A tight 1 minute we had.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you said it. My toast tonight on Primetime Party Time is rainy days. It's nice to have them here in January. It's real fun, especially during the daytime when you can see it.
Yes.
And not just hear it.
And we got some hail action as well.
Yeah, that's right. That did happen.
Got to see some almost, the we can't have snow here. We don't get that, but we do every once in a while get some hail. And I know there are people who are like, I had a writing professor that was like, never write about the weather. No one cares. I'm like, listen, I get it. You're from New York. You see weather. You don't care. Weather is exciting to us.
Yeah.
In Southern California, we have to comment on it, and we have to complain to anyone who actually has weather and be really dramatic about that. It's like, you get your license, and then you get your license to complain about when the weather goes below 70. But yeah, no, I love the rainy season. I feel like I don't know how I'd feel if it was as often as, say, like the Pacific Northwest. I was like, would I be as enamored by the rain? I don't know. But here, I'm like, yes, cozy, make some like stews, some braises.
Oh, yeah.
Get comfy. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. But yeah, how about your roast? What is bad?
All right. Another Californian thing to talk about. My roast this week is no surprise to anyone who lives in the LA area. You have dealt with this. The 10 freeway is the worst up here. You ever driven on the 10? See, the 101 merging to the 10, I mean, that's one thing. Everybody knows about that. There are memes about that. That is you fight to get 4 lanes over. It's hell to drive on. I had the privilege of finding out about the 43rd Street exit, which is like a roundabout stop sign to like a 2-lane just freeway. It's, I don't know, the 10. I didn't realize that the 10 was the awfulness of the 10 stretched past the very famous merge. But it does.
Very famous merge. When I gotta take the 10 to the 101.
Exactly.
What are you
the 110,
doing
the
here?
110, not the 10, the 110. Sorry, the 110, not the 10. The 10's great. The 10 will get you all the way to Florida if you want it to. We actually,
yeah, I know it's hard. We talk about the 10, but it's the 110.
I have a friend who's lived in 3 or 4 different states in his adult life, and always a mile from the 10, all across the southern part, the southernmost part of the United States. But the 110, the one that goes through downtown, that is the worst. That's what we're roasting. We're not roasting that. We're roasting the 110 tonight.
The 110 sucks. It really does. I feel like anytime I'm going to the west side and I have to do like that changeover to the 101, that is always the what lane was I supposed to be in, and then it's the all right, gonna have to make some maneuvers. Gonna have to make some choices and hope everyone's paying attention.
You just hope. Tracy, what are you roasting, toasting?
Oh, yeah. So one of my toasts related to our segment tonight, the music from Chuck. It is such a nice trip back indie memory lane. like from the theme song to everything else in it. It's just like even the finale episode has it ends with like the head and the heart, rivers and roads. I'm like, we're getting like towards like a different era of indie, but then in the beginning it's like Band of Horses and the Shins and everything. And I'm
Horses.
like, this was such a good time.
Yeah. Broken
For,
Bell shows
like,
up near the end too. That's something I distinctly remember from when it was airing.
yeah. So that's a one of toast. Another toast is I have a good friend from high school that I hadn't talked in a really long time, but she just like recently subscribed to my YouTube channel for music. So yeah,
What's your YouTube? Do you
very.
want to plug it?
Oh yeah, I guess I'll self plug.
You
I
should
mean,
plug
how
it.
many promotions is this? But it's www.youtube.com/Tracy Ratify. So yeah, those who know my last name will know that's a bit of a pun. And for everyone else, you'll find out when you Google. But yeah, and then my roast is also going to segue into what we're drinking tonight, but I was preparing our beverage for this evening and I took a lot of different little ingredients. I was doing little splishes and splashes of thises and that's. And then I was like, I just need a little bit more this. And I opened my cabinet and a box of linguine came in and just went knocked over my little like I don't know what you'd call it, like a not a not like a decanter, but a similar like cocktail shakery type
Oh, okay.
container of cocktail all to the ground.
Mm.
So I, soaked it all up with a towel and I cleaned the floors, but I do feel like there are remnants of gin on my floor. And I'm like, well, this probably kills bacteria as well. So, we're just gonna roll with it till I get to mopping. But that's like it's just one of those like you're very frustrated in the moment, and then later you're just like, man, it just had to like fall exactly at the right angle and hit it just so.
Mm.
And I just laughed to be like, this is my life, man.
Rest in peace, Jen. Oh.
This is why Sean calls me female George Costanza because because of this shit. But yeah, that's my roast. It's, I'll recover from it. Definitely no use crying over spilled martini. It just means you have a very good reason to make a second one, which goes into what we're drinking tonight is martinis because Chuck is a spy show and the James Bond cocktail of choice is a martini, like it's like a martini shaken, not stirred with a thin slice of lemon, I want to say. So
That's good.
we
That's what
did
I
our
have.
own take on martinis. Yeah. And mine is a elderflower martini. So I took gin. I did the Suntory Roku gin because I wanted to try it. Never had it before.
Oh
It's
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah. I was looking at that one too.
Yeah, and it was like on sale at Bevmo, so I was a
Nice.
bargain babe, and I was like, let's do it. And then I got some elderflower syrup because I like it and everything. It's kind of I have a crush on that flavor. And then some elderflower liqueur, and I juiced a few small lemons, added a lemon like a peel, and a couple of thinly sliced cucumbers. So it's very much one of those like refreshing botanical beverages, and that's what I'm about. How's your martini? Did you
It's
go simple or exotic?
yours sounds wonderful. Mine. So I kind of did a little prep and watched a video. I think it was Steve the
Ooh.
bartender make four different types of martinis. He's great. Make four different types of martinis. So he did the classic, he did the dirty, he did the fitty fitty, and he did I couldn't tell you what the third one was, but the it was the one with like the mushed olives. Anyways,
Oh, I've heard of that.
so
Like
I tried the
muddled.
class. Yeah, the muddled olives. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I tried the classic with olives in practicing, but tonight I went with the straight James Bond recipe, and I haven't taken a sip yet. But cheers!
Cheers. Virtual clink.
Yes, for sure, clink.
I
Get a
know.
sound effect going.
This is quite nice. I should actually write down this recipe
You
because
should.
it's pretty good. I mean, it's a little like acidic from the amount of lemon juice I put in it. Like, but not in a bad way. Just like if you're not a huge citrus person, I'm like, maybe you would replace that with like a berry or something. But
Yeah. I appreciate olives.
it's pretty
I
nice.
appreciate lemons.
Yeah, I've never had like a classic dirty martini. My main history with martini though is I was in Japan and it was before I could legally drink in the States. So I was having a whole like just a ball trying different types of cocktails. And if you can hear the coaster coming through in my audio, that train is coming around. But I tried the James Bond cocktail on this one like random bar in like a train station. And I remember just immediately ordering a pina colada to chase it because my palate was not ready for a martini. I was just like, nope, nope, this is really strong. And then I was like kind of drunk and went to Uniqlo. And I remember just like being like, just buying all of these sale t-shirts for as souvenirs. And it did not, burn a hole in my credit card because it was the sales were good, but I could tell it was with one of my good friends. And I think like by the time we got to the airport, I had, sobered up a bit and was like, man, I was probably like pretty annoying for the past few hours, just like drunk shopping. Then we ended up at the airport McDonald's. I think I ordered a shrimp burger, which is like a little bit of a daring choice pre-flight.
Oh yeah.
Right. But you know what? It was fine. Did not have an issue with that. It also was like deep fried shrimp, so it's pretty safe. I've definitely been dealt dirtier hands by other types of pre-flight meals that I won't get into because that's not so fun. But yeah, that's like the first time I had a martini. And then like as I got older, I tried like pomegranate martinis.
Okay.
I like a cucumber martini.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had the savory kind, like the olive or other things. So I need to try that to see if that's something that I'd be into because I see a lot of people make them like as they're cooking, and I'm like, it looks like I'd be a very like fancy lady if I made some like dirty martinis as I make pasta. But just we gotta baby steps to get there. Yeah. So
sweet.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Well,
about martinis.
Hope you've got your refreshing beverage on you. We're going to take a couple seconds here to download the Intersect, and we'll be right back with our talk on Chuck. Chuck. NBC's procedural drama.
Yes.
Well, one of many. This one happened to run from the 24th of September, 2007 to the 27th of January, 2012.
And that's like a nice time slot because the past few shows we've been reviewing, this one picks up like in 2007 as Veronica Mars was coming to a close for its on-air.
It's true.
Viewing.
Our
so
segments have been chronological.
We're moving in a nice sequence. I'm sure we'll play around with timings, but it's for our drama segments of Ghost of Prime Times Past. We're in a nice chronology here. So, Chuck, I know it felt like we were downloading the Intersect, watching many episodes of Chuck right before this.
Yeah, it did.
Many flashing images in front of our faces, but yeah, to get just the background of Chuck in case y'all have not seen it before, it is a procedural drama, but it is packed with a lot of comedy, a lot of quirky, like nerdy humor. It's created by Chris Fedek and Josh Schwartz. And yes, aired from 24th of September 2007 to the 27th of January 2012, starring Zachary Levi, Yvonne Strahovski, and Adam Baldwin. And there are 5 seasons. We love the title sequence, although it is not featured in the first episode
Or
of
the
Short
last.
Skirt Long Jacket by Cake.
Or the last, but yes, and it is
Oh,
an
yes.
Emmy-nominated sequence for like most outstanding title sequence. Well deservedly.
It's great.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted it to be their own theme song once that was going around. And I love Cake. I think I liked that album when I was it's called like Fashion Nugget
Mhm.
when I was in middle school. And I remember having to get the like clean album because I was young, but it was,
That's
it's
funny.
great.
That's right.
I know. That's a whew back there. Be like, no explicit content. It's like, yeah, now children could just go on the internet and find it, not have to like get edited at the record store. But yeah, and we have some Emmys that have been awarded to Merit Yonka, Outstanding Stunt Coordination. But yeah, the plot of the show is very much that Chuck is an ordinary guy working at a Buy More, which is similar to like a Best Buy. And then he all of a sudden, gets a email from a classmate slash roommate slash friend from his days at Stanford, though it's the same guy who gets him kicked out of Stanford. And he opens it and, is flooded with all these images, which you learn later are government secrets that were coded. And he could internalize all of them and become this like human computer database for like classified information. And it's kind of how he starts to get in with the CIA. So they all start coming in undercover, but then soon enough, very soon enough, he finds out that they are there to be his handler and his bodyguard, and he's to help, solve different cases that are happening around, since he will see something and it will automatically trigger a flash where he sees, either like a bomb or a threat or, so a bunch of different files within a matter of seconds. So yeah, that's like the nutshell intro to what is Chuck. But Daniel, what is your history with this series?
Okay, we're finally talking about a show on air this time that I watched from the beginning when it aired, and I don't know why, but or what drew me to it initially. I do think that it was like I got into like consciously into like primetime television watching probably in like the 2006 season. So this was probably like the first year that I was like just like, okay, it's September, like let's sit down and watch all these new shows. Big Brother is over. But so and so I definitely like I distinctly remember watching the first few seasons, and I distinctly remember never finishing the series, and I don't know why. I remember that the last scene that I watched like while I was watching was something that I've now discovered is late season 4 with Timothy Dalton as a guest star, which is weird that I would have. I just really can't figure out where I went with it, because at the time I was watching the James Bond movies, marathoning, and so I was super stoked on him showing up. But yeah, it's basically just watched it from the top and kind of fell off somewhere near the end and have no idea why. Absolutely no idea why. What about you?
I watched it from start to finish on the air. I was a longtime fan. I remember the one year I have attended Comic-Con, like Chuck was very big.
Oh, nice.
There was, yeah. Like
That's
I know
fun.
I got like a free Bones t-shirt, but I definitely got some like Chuck swag as well.
Some
But
Buy More swag?
yeah,
Carmichael Industries
yes.
swag? Who knows?
Some sort of like, slap wristband
Yeah,
or whatever
of course.
was the choice of that year. But yeah, I also love James Bond and all things kind of in the spy world, and I'll kind of go in and out of watching a lot of these. But I do like that this show, and I think we've discussed it before off the air, is like a Get Smart meets like more serious spy stuff, and then
You-
also all of these like modern jokes, since it does take place in a big box store, and there's all these other offshoot chain stores like Wienerlicious, that's supposed to be like Wiener Schnitzel, and Orange, it's supposed to be like Orange Julius, and a lot of like kind of endearing nerd humor for
I
different.
yeah. Give me like fictional retail any day. I
I
really
love
enjoy
it.
seeing that. And I really love kind of what they do with like fake companies and fake stores and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, you cannot convince me. And you just said this that the pitch in the room for this show was not like, all right, you guys know 40-year-old virgin just came out, get smart, but instead of Steve Carell, let's make the hopeless romantic in his 20s. Just old enough that he should be doing something else, which is interesting with Chuck. He is 27, 28 when the show starts.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like he's living with his sister and her husband, who are accomplished doctors. And there's a lot of like, all right, you didn't finish Stanford. You're a supervisor of the Geek Squad Nerd Herd. And like where is your life going? Where's your love life going? He's stuck. Basically, his only romantic story is like his college girlfriend, who in a fun spy show kind of way is a spy, much like his college roommate was. um, so it's kind of fun in that way. But yeah, so we started here. I guess when we watched this series, when we rewatched this series for this episode, we decided to do the very first episode. We decided to do the very last episode, and then we decided to do a couple in the middle. So, Tracy, was the very first episode what you remembered it being?
You know what? I didn't realize how much they make him out to be this stunted character as
Yeah, me
much as
neither.
I did watching it now. Because, like everything you just said, they really go into him being like this, not quite dropout, but basically from Stanford, he gets kicked out for reasons that are, later revealed to him. But he also is, yeah, like kind of the captain of the nerd herd, and he hasn't had a girlfriend since college, and when he talks to girls all he does is talk about his ex-girlfriend, and you just like see him and you as a like a real schmuck, and you're kind of like, where is this going? Like, how does he fit into the intro where you're seeing this guy who is the Bryce Larkin character that's showing up looking very suave, and his one person he picks to send this intersect to happens to be Chuck. So it does set up that premise of, person who's kind of down on their luck, being very almost mundanely ordinary, and then all of a sudden, you know, very much the email to Chuck is like the radioactive spider bite that he gets. And I think what's very interesting is looking at where this series started in like 2007, and it's this like hybrid of like technology and human, and you're like, this is where social media and technology is really on the rise in our lives. So you are seeing someone pitch a show where it's like this human becomes a computer.
Yes, but the
and
audience,
and and he can spy. So
yes,
like that's like what's, because as you watch later, he learns, and it's almost like when he learns more spy stuff, it's like him getting software updates of like, you're
that's true.
gonna do this and you're gonna be able to do all of the like fighting moves.
The
So
Intersect 2.0.
it's yeah, it's funny to look back on it that way. But yeah, I feel like this pilot is good about setting the tone. And yeah, it does have a very quintessential song for the
Oh,
time period.
in place of the lack of short skirt long jacket in the pilot episode, yeah, they definitely they throw us 2007's Cobra style, which I knew
Yes.
famously from what was that movie, Employee of the Month? You remember that one?
Yes. Which is kind of funny since this show is also like nerdy guy
Yeah,
in the
that's true.
store.
That's true. They do share a setting, huh?
So it's a little bit of like, are you winking at that movie
Right.
there? But it also works. Like
Yep.
when you're looking at the different sequences and the way that song is doing the beats, like I'm like, I get why they picked it, but I also get why short skirt long jacket slid in there and was like, no, this is exactly what this show needs. So yeah, and I do love the soundtrack of the show. Episode by episode, I'm like, ugh, I love it.
It's a good sound. You know something else that's like super 2007 about this show?
Yes.
Is so I don't really know how to explain this, and I don't really know how to explain the actual the object. But Morgan, the character of Chuck's best friend in the pilot
Yes.
on the entire series, we'll talk about him. His character's wardrobe in the pilot episode. This is interesting. He has this belt, and it's like a couple metal rings, and then like
Oh, yes.
you know what I'm talking about? What is?
Yeah.
Could you help me out with that?
So it's the one where it's like kind of fabric.
Yes.
And then there's like the metal rings and like the grommets.
Yeah, so
kind
I
of.
used to get clothes that had that belt all the time as a teenager, and I'm like, what do I do with this? What do I wear this with? I've never seen it in practice, minus this pilot episode. I'm like, yep, 2007. I remember these.
Like this is how I was supposed to wear this. I did not know.
That's not the
at
takeaway
time.
from the pilot. The takeaway is where is Chuck and Sarah going to go?
Yes.
But yeah, that was my takeaway for sure.
I know we should note that the pilot, as much as it sets up the scene of Chuck being now part of this mission, it's also him meeting Sarah and being immediately infatuated and not knowing at first that she is undercover specifically to become his handler. And that becomes the thing throughout the show too, where it's like what part is real, what part is on the job, and eventually blossoms into something more. But they kind of do the, traditional TV show back and forth. Will they, won't they? Throughout the series.
They started really early, so they have to go on basically a date because she's wondering why he's connected to Bryce Larkin.
Yes.
And so there's this whole kind of like, is he actually charming? Is she actually into him? Or is she just really, really good at her job? Interestingly enough, this question, which does get answered throughout the series, as far as I can tell, interestingly enough, out of all the episodes we watched, I didn't actually watch one where they were together, but as these episodes have spoilers, they do get together for what seems like a large portion of the series. And then
I think in the later, like season 3 and 4, because we watched a lot of season 2, and I think on our own we watched a bit more of season 1 and bits of season 3. But we know when we get to the finale, when they do the flashbacks, you're like, oh, you guys were together for a good chunk of this show.
Yeah.
But it's weirdly enough not super consistent.
And it's answered in an interesting, it's not answered in an interesting way by the series finale, which we also watched. So what's like, we'll tackle the middle portion of this later, but the series finale very much mirrors the series premiere, but like what's different?
Yeah, so what's different is that the roles are swapped. Sarah has lost her memories. So she knows she's a spy, but she has no recollection of her mission with the Intersect, her relationship with Chuck. So it's interesting to watch right after seeing the pilot, because she's almost now the fish out of water character, and he's filling her in on different things. So it is very much like, this is the end, but this is also the new beginning for them. But it also sucks because, as we've said, they went back and forth throughout the series romantically, and they were married. And then now they're kind of going back, and she's like, I've never met you before. So it's kind of the, will they continue things, or will they go in separate directions?
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, because I was so invested in the relationship the first time I watched this show, I hated this finale.
Really? When it was airing?
I was really upset. Yeah, I was really upset. I remember thinking, like, this is the worst finale of all time. Like, I'm so mad. Like, I was so dramatic about it because I was really attached to their relationship. But watching it now and having like time go on, rewatched it, my opinion completely changed, which goes to show, like, my opinion on a lot of series finales is you will hate it the first time a lot of times because you hate that the show is ending.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the main thing that kind of sours your perspective on it. But watching it this time, I thought it was a really smart way to end the show and still leave it open. Because in a way, you watch it and they do have a kiss, and you think like, okay, so they're it's almost like they're starting over again, and now she's the one that has to learn from him, and it's this nice switcheroo. And at the same time, yes, they're not a solidified couple anymore. All of that stuff has gone, to the wayside. And you can definitely see, like, when you've been watching it for a long time, like, that's a lot to let go of and sacrifice and be like, so basically all these moments that have been building up are for it to start all over again. But in a way, that's like a really nice way to end it, because it's like, hey, they're probably going to go on, have new adventures where they get to know each other again and do more of this. And that gives, the creators the flexibility of, if they want to do more, they have a lot to play with. And if they don't, the viewers have seen so much of the show that they can kind of make their own realities. But I think there is, the viewer that likes to create their own in their head, and the ones that are like, want to see everything in front of them. So I can definitely see how there could be different tastes to this series finale. How did you feel about it?
So it is okay. How do I feel about the series finale? Well, this is tough, right? Because I haven't seen the show in 10 years.
A while.
So the show as a whole, the series premiere and the series finale are really interesting because they're very plot heavy in a way where they're like telling story at a pace that the rest of the show isn't telling a story. And they're also like the status quo is changed or being created or dismantled in a way that the rest of the procedural episodes don't really work. So, or don't work the same way, right? So it works in a way where it's a good bookend to the series premiere and the questions that the opening of the series asks, right? And it does show that like every single character has grown up in the 5 years. So his sister and her husband have a child, and they've reconnected with their mother, and everybody knows everybody's a spy. And could you speak to actually how Morgan, his best friend, actually kind of goes through some stuff too?
Yeah, because, you watch Morgan in the beginning, and he's kind of this jittery, nerdy character who's almost doesn't have the courage to really like speak up for himself. And then when you watch the finale, he like completely confronts Casey, who is the really like machismo and also kind of cold-blooded spy who becomes more warm-hearted as the series goes on. But he's definitely the one that they assigned in the past to be the, take people out, don't get attached.
Another thing that the finale does well is it separates Casey. Though Casey does spend the entire series working with Chuck and Sarah, it separates him once again, like he was separated and adversarially to Chuck and Sarah in the premiere, and they actually meet up halfway through. And where he was very much kind of vouching for Chuck's death in the premiere, he was very much like an antagonistic figure. He is he's singing a different song. He's very much like, all right, well, this guy's honorable. He's a spy. These two people, they're both great. Like, we are keeping them alive. So that's really fun to see. But yeah, it's interesting because other than that, I'm happy I watched the premiere and the finale together. But I definitely needed to go backwards and kind of like pick up some pieces in the middle to kind of like see the show, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. But it really did work as a series finale. From what I could tell, it's just the show that I remembered was a very different show. The other thing the series finale does is it basically like also gives a lot to a lot of other supporting characters. There are a lot of supporting characters in the Buy More. There's like the kind of like old, weird with a dark past alcoholic Jeff, who in the next episode we're actually talking about, he kind of gets his own little side episode here, season 2, episode 5, Chuck versus Tom Sawyer. What did you think about this one?
This show, or this episode is very interesting in the sense that it's another way that they do. So Chuck throughout the show, even though he has the intersect, which gives him all of this, government secret spy knowledge, he also, there are different times where they're about to take truth serum. He's like, and they have an antidote, and he says, wait a minute, make the guy test it. I've seen too many comic book movies to, that's what you have to do. And they're like, yes, I was going to just give you another poison. And then, he also has ones where he's like, oh, I've seen these weapons before. And they're like, did you flash? And he's like, no, this is in the spy section of Buy More. So there's all of these like ways that they kind of show like being a, nerd or geeky person, like has these like really redeeming knowledge and ways that these people kind of save the day by having these traits that are usually kind of made fun of or bullied. So I think they also kind of lended that to Jeff because he has this record for being the best at this video game. And it ends up being that the person has to beat this game in order to stop another national threat. And Jeff is always like kind of the, yeah, as you've said, like in the Christmas party episodes, he's the one where they're like, no more spiking the eggnog. And then, creeping everyone out, Jeff. And he's kind of like, okay. So it's also taking him and making him more of a character and less of just kind of a punching bag throughout the ensemble. And as the series goes on, Jeff becomes more and more likable. And I think this is kind of the start of that. But yeah, how did you feel about this episode?
I feel like it was. I feel like I needed to see more ahead of it. That's something that you kind of build up to. It's obviously something you build up to. It's taking a tertiary character and kind of fleshing them out in a fun way.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, it's fun because the show is so like 2000s network, which is great. It's great, but it is really kind of fun in that way. But yeah, other than that, that was kind of where I was at. I agree, Jeff. Jeff has a moment in an episode that we'll talk about in a bit that I thought was really rewarding after seeing this episode. But I do feel like I could have done with some more build up to this episode. This isn't when I watched the series premiere and the series finale. It's like, okay, I really need an episode here that both encompasses what the show is and is the middle that's missing of the plot here between these two episodes. Yes. Chuck versus Tom Sawyer is a fun episode. It wasn't that middle.
No. We were searching for that middle, and it wasn't quite there. It's really enjoyable, but I did have to go back to a lot of season 1 episodes to get to season 2.
To get to season 2?
And it's a good point to make about this show. It's a really great show, but it is not one where you can just pop into an episode and understand what's going on. We're getting more into these series-long arc shows. Mm-hmm. So this one is, as much as there are the individual cases throughout this show, there are a lot of building blocks throughout each to where if you miss one, you are missing something in the next episode. So I feel like that was something by watching these two season 2 episodes that I figured out, where I was like, oh, I kind of remember this show being a bit more light and not as much of, kind of like a show that I watched, but I didn't feel like it was so much of a gotta pay attention to every little thing. And I think this time around, I was like, no, you really do have to see all these different subplots in order to get to the end of season finale and really get what's going on, because there are a lot of things in the background, the calls that go directly to Casey, and whatever Awesome and Ellie are doing in the background. There's a lot happening, and then they do all get tied together. But the other episode from season 2 that we watched is Chuck versus the Third Dimension. And I think the fun part of this episode is that it was back when 3D was really big. So you could have watched this episode with 3D glasses on and seeing a few, little like kabooms.
Mhm.
and that's it's fun to go back and be like, oh yeah, that was a thing that we were trying to make happen, and it didn't quite go too much further from
Yeah.
there. I think this is another one that shows the quirks and a lot of the making fun of corporate that we see throughout Chuck, because they do have like a Subway campaign
Yeah,
sprinkled throughout this
Subway
episode.
comes in, and I had kind of heard this happening. I had forgotten that this had happened. But Subway comes in and like does a deal with Chuck the series to kind of keep it on the air. I guess save it. Like the fans had to go buy sandwiches, and if Subway figured out that the partnership was, worthy that they could continue this marketing deal that continued to allow the show to be budgeted to be on air. Which that's great. Those are some dedicated fans. I don't like to talk poorly about much, but Subway's tough for me. So, great on the Chuck fans.
I know. They just had an SNL skit this past week that was about the Subway marketing boardroom. So it's funny because I was watching that and this and being like, this is hilarious. Yeah, it's about them pitching like, what was wrong with Jared? And then the whole room is like, many things. Yeah. So yeah, and it also makes me think of 30 Rock. They have an episode that's about product placement, and then they talk about how, it's like so not organic. And then they enter the elevator and there's someone in a Snapple costume. Oh. And they're like, I love Snapple. Diet Snapple has no sugar. And so, yeah, that 30 Rock is very big on doing the kind of like sarcastic and play on words with different kind of business jokes. Whoever was at Partnerships on NBC back then. I think, yeah. So Chuck kind of does that too with a lot of the different corporate, they have all of these mall businesses and kind of like like mall and strip mall places that you're always kind of laughing at. Sarah's working at a different booth in a different little outfit.
I didn't see that. That's funny.
And like that's how all these like undercover, and even like when Rachel Bilson is on, she's the kind of like gourmet deli girl.
Oh my god, she's like the first
caught
recurring
at the
guest
docks
star, right?
for importing cheese.
She's like the first recurring guest star, right? The series has a lot of recurring guest stars.
So many, and so many like really great actors as these recurring guest stars. It's like, if I was gonna kind of repeat something I said from the Veronica Mars episode, this is another show that I think has a lot of great picks for guest stars that recur and then go even more beyond after this show is finished. So yeah, that's the Third Dimension is definitely just like you get that quirk and giddy humor that you see throughout Chuck that balances out the fact that this is very much an action drama with a bit of comedy in it.
Yeah. Like, also, fun thing about Chuck versus the Third Dimension is the episode is about him having to protect a rock star. Speaking of guest stars, this one just happens to be played by Dominic Monaghan, who is basically playing Charlie from Lost, and like the only thing missing is You All Everybody. But yeah, it's so it is fun. And it's if you've seen any of like the Charlie band Lost flashbacks or Flash Sideways, this is very much like a full episode of that taking place in the Chuck world and combining those worlds, unofficially.
It's a great crossover of shows that we love.
Yeah. So then, do you watch anything else, or do we just skip over to season 3?
I watched a lot of season 1.
You watched a lot of season 1. Which is how the roommate stuff plays out, right? It kind of goes back about who Bryce Larkin was and his roommate in Stanford, history and whatnot, who Sarah is, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
I think it sets up a lot for the rest of the show, and in a way that is very slow and steady. But yeah, you do find out that Bryce Larkin, said that he cheated on the test in order to save him from being someone who would not have had a choice of if he joined the government or not, because they were very much like the way his scores was. This guy's going to be able to internalize so much information. There's no way we can't use him. And then, it's funny because later on it's like, well, he ended up having that fame anyway. But it's like he could have had his degree. But, it all kind of worked out for him anyway. And then you do see that Bryce Larkin is very much alive and that he did not
for
get
long,
killed off as he once thought. And you also see Sarah choose to stay with Chuck instead of going off the deep end and off the radar with Bryce. So I think that's a lot of what you get out of season 1. You're starting to get, hints that Sarah has some feelings for Chuck, but you can tell that she's very cautious because she's already gotten in a little bit of hot water and also just emotional turmoil for having a relationship with a colleague. So you can see that she's taking baby steps, but you get the idea that they will end up together after you watch season 1. And then you also are getting to know the rest of the ensemble a lot more, like Morgan being very present throughout and narrowly missing the fact that Chuck is a spy just by a hair in many of the episodes. And he's always kind of having to think of creative excuses to, start hiding. I think Ellie thinks he's on drugs for a while. And then later it's just like, oh, you're just like infatuated with your girlfriend. But that gets into the episode that we both watched and we thought was a really good representation of the middle, which is season 3, episode 9, Chuck versus the Beard, where Morgan does find out after 3 seasons that Chuck is in fact a spy. So
this one's great.
Why did we pick this episode?
This So this episode we did discuss before, while we were figuring out this episode, but the one that really like put it over is that this episode was actually chosen last year by fans to be the episode that the cast and creators did a table read of for a charity through Entertainment Weekly, and we can post the link to that in the show notes. But it was really cool in the way where it is a big episode. It's Zachary Levi's directorial debut, which is really cool. And it is just sort of like it's a perfect middle in the way where Morgan does find out that Chuck is a spy. Spies actually infiltrate the Bymore. They find the base. Morgan finds out they find the base. Bymore thinks that corporate's basically buying them out and firing everybody but Chuck and Morgan because these bad guys are looking for Chuck and Morgan. By the way, the villain is played by Diedrich Bader, also known for his role as Tank Evans in the greatest movie of all time, Surf's Up. But yes. So basically, and in this episode, I mean, Casey's coming around, right? Sarah's off with who I remember being a rather large character,
Charles
guest star.
Shaw?
Daniel Shaw, I think.
Daniel Shaw.
Brandon Routh plays him.
Yes.
And you see Chuck's jealousy in full force. He can't use the intercept at this point. I'm not sure why. He just... I think it's like right after he downloads number 2.0. He just like can't get it to work. Sarah's not really there for him because she's off with Shaw.
Yes.
Awesome at this point does know that Chuck's a spy, and it's interesting because now he is in his most vulnerable, having to hide this from Chuck's sister and his wife. And it's just it's a really fun episode. It does. It was my favorite of the Bymore subplots. It was kind of great having them rally around each other to keep the store. You can definitely like we talked about how Jeff and Lester kind of pay off in the finale, and this is the beginning of, or I don't know if this is the beginning of that, but this definitely is a representation of that, where Lester gets up and sings "Fortunate Son" to all the budding Bymore employees. Also,
I love it's like, is it called Jester or Jeffster, where it's like Lester and Jeff's band, and they do performances throughout. And to be honest, they're pretty good.
They're
like
pretty
in
good.
The finale, they do "Take on Me," and you're like, you can get that note? Like, hats off.
Yeah,
and they like get the orchestra to back them up, and it's It's great. It's one of those just like you can tell like different shows will take people who have musical talent and be like, how do we write this in? Because this is great.
Yeah.
And they do a really good job with Jeff and Lester throughout with
Also,
that. Yeah. And this,
to your point earlier, Jeff actually helps out Casey in an altercation with spies in this episode.
yes.
So that was kind of a fun, weird Jeff moment that pays off after watching that season 2 episode. And then Morgan takes Chuck being a spy really well.
Yeah.
really, really
He
well.
doesn't seem like totally shocked. I feel like because Chuck had so much promise, everyone is kind of like, you're really just staying at the Buy More. And so it is kind of easy for them to go, oh, you're a spy? Well, that makes sense. We were all kind of wondering like why you're still hanging out here with all of us. So I feel like there's something to that where they're like, oh yeah, they're quick to get on board because they're like, so that's what you're doing. Okay. Yeah. It's a cover. Great. And he's kind of like, I mean, it wasn't the whole time, but it is now. But I do love the uprising.
The uprising's great.
It's great. That. Like all the different subplots of like, I want to be assistant manager and the different, when Morgan does the interview for Chuck because he's on a mission, I thought that was like a really sweet moment in the first season. And then you're seeing him now as the assistant manager where he has to fire Chuck at first. And it's really funny to watch because he just does with it really straight face, like, this is a tough thing every manager has to do at some point in their life. And then later, Chuck is immediately back on board. But I do love that also. They have the whole uprising and Casey's coming in. And they're like, are you sure you want to join us? And he gives this whole spiel on like, I hate, it's kind of like Casey's like an interesting character because you get the idea that he's a very like conservative minded person. But then he also is like, I don't like, when people get all up in arms, but I also hate when they grow up to be these fat cats. That's even worse. So then he joins all of them, and I just thought it was really funny. Like they just poke so much fun at these big corporations. So I get a real kick out of that watching it, especially like seeing these shows now like Superstore, where like that is the whole show.
Right.
The store and corporate and all the drama, and you're almost watching this show going like they had a little bit of that, and now that gets played up so much more in different sitcoms. So it's the start of that, I feel.
Yeah, it's a great middle episode between Chuck and Morgan's friendship, and then Morgan also like the reason he's not pissed off about the lie of Chuck being a spy is because Chuck wasn't able to keep the real lie from him, which is that he's not over Sarah, who's on the mission with Shaw, and he's very, jealous. And so Morgan has a heart-to-heart about just knowing that and knowing Chuck fully and knowing that when something's wrong, fine, something's confusing. But at the core, he does know Chuck. He knows when Chuck's lying, and that's the big tell. Also, it's a great episode for... we haven't even talked about Big Mike, the store manager, yet, but Mark Christopher Lawrence is like fantastic. He's such a believable, fun store manager. And he gets so much to do in this episode. And honestly, the only thing that this episode doesn't touch on that, when you're looking at 3 episodes of the show, the beginning, the last one, we're finding the middle. Like this is obviously like this is my nomination if you watch any episode of the show, really, personally. But I agree. It doesn't answer like what Sarah feels about Chuck. So it's cool to know that like in your rewatch of the season 1 episodes, you were able to kind of find that.
Yeah, it's easier to see it in hindsight. And I think though, I agree with you that this episode is a good representation because most of the show you are questioning where are Sarah's feelings. She is very like, emotionally internal, and it's very reflective of her being a spy and being told, got to turn off your feelings and stick to the job at hand. But you can see, and she mentions it, I think, early in season 1 or maybe towards the beginning of season 2, where she talks with Casey and is like, don't you ever just wish you could have a family or children or a normal life someday? And then Casey kind of goes to her and is like, we chose this life, to serve people and this is, the ultimate job in our industry, and that comes with sacrifices, and you see that she's torn. And I think that's the thing you're looking throughout, is she's always torn between, like, Chuck is definitely her person for wanting that life.
Yeah.
And you see her bouncing around and kind of going back and forth because she has that internal struggle of, like, do I do the spy life, or do I do this kind of hybrid life where I still spy, but I'm also having this real emotional connected relationship? So I think it's a good one, because you seeing her with Shaw, who you're always kind of suspicious of from the start. I think, though, that's mostly because you watch it, most of the show you're experiencing it through Chuck's perspective, and he is very much like, both enviously suspicious of Shaw, but he also does these little things, and, like, you see him at the end of this episode call into the buy more and kind of puts and I'm like, oh, corporate decided to keep everyone. It's all, we were like impressed by your demonstration, and you look back and go like, there's more to this. And, like, haven't seen the show in such a long time, I'm already hooked back in to be like, I need to rewatch and see this subplot, like how Shaw plays into everything and how that goes on later. So there's a lot to this show.
Yeah, there is. So
there really is. We can nutshell it, but I do think it still goes in so many different directions as well.
Yeah. Aside from the spy stuff, aside from the being 27 stuff, aside from the romance stuff, we got a question in the chat, and I do have to talk about this. We do have to talk about this. I did allude to it earlier that I love me some fictional retail, and BMAC asks, how does buy more compare to working at Target? Which I did do a couple retail stunts, in my late teens, and, like, probably when I was 20. And I will say, one of the fun parts about, like, Superstore is definitely like the Target show, being a big box store. Though I will say there's a lot to, like, really appreciate watching this show, just about, like, friends working together and stuff like that, and hanging out in certain departments, and, like, especially when they kind of, like, override the entertainment room and stuff like that. Like, yes, that's the stuff we did in the entertainment section at Target as teens, yeah. But I will say, like, my stint at, like, I did 6 months at Office Depot as an 18-year-old. And that's the one that this show really reminded me of. That, like, assistant manager closet that they give Morgan as an office is like, oh, I can't. Yeah, I've had meetings in that closet, and Big Mike reminds me of that kind of store manager. And it's very much, like, nostalgic in a way. I loved it. It was definitely something that I was hoping to relate to going into this episode. It's definitely something I did. It was fun. It was. Yeah, Target's definitely the place where you have the Jeff and Lester kind of vibes.
Oh yeah,
it's definitely the store.
I agree.
It's a little bigger. You can get away with stuff.
It gives you, like, it takes you back to that time where, if you've either worked in, I did some retail at our local outlet mall, but I also did event services in college where you did a lot of AV tech, which kind of brings you into these similar personalities.
Yes.
Like, very much like the Nerd Herd, we were like the IT tech support for all events and would come in and do stuff. And it just does bring you back to having that camaraderie, and also the silliness and goofing off and making these, like, kind of creative pursuits throughout your shifts to make them go better, go faster. And also, you were always kind of having that double-edged relationship with the manager and assistant manager, where they were like, yeah, get back to work, but also, like, that was great.
Yes. Oh.
And I love seeing that with, like, Big Mike, where he's like, yeah, how dare you do that, but also I'm gonna promote you.
Yeah. The store manager having sketchy stories that kind of check out, and him being relatable weirdly on, like, a closing shift, like, yes. And then the winning over the assistant manager character, and a lot of the B plots in the show are about the assistant manager, right? Whether it's whoever played Vince Masuka on Dexter, or Emmett, played by Tony Hale. or eventually Morgan,
love
who does
Tony
get
Hale.
promoted to assistant manager. Yeah, we do. That the night that you win over the assistant manager in retail, he is snooping around just like Emmett does. That is the perfect representation of an assistant manager. And the night you win that person over, you never forget. You never forget.
Yes. I think also, since I worked a lot of night shifts and closing shifts in college, like this show is really big into that, like where they have the cage where if you lock it just so only one person has the key and you're really screwed. Like those are just things where you go back and you're like, like as much as that was like such a difficult time, it also, you're like, I think going forward, you're like, I miss a little bit of this, like the scrappy,
Oh yeah,
I
do.
team oriented, like what you're doing every day isn't super important, and yet at the same time it's what everyone relies on. It's really fun
I
to
agree.
look back on that. And the show also colors all of those roles in a really nice way. Like they're showing all of these people who are kind of like older than maybe what people would expect for working in these fields, and showing them, having like with Lester and Jeff, it's a good example of like, yeah, they work at the Buy More, but then they also have these pursuits of like, we're going to be this band and do all this other stuff. And they make a lot of these characters that are kind of side characters very dimensional. I think that is a large strength of this show.
Yes.
Is they make everyone a big character, even if their role in the plot isn't super crucial. So
yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, and it's fun seeing the side characters in the title sequence, like the B plot characters, the Buy More characters, that they're in the title sequence from the beginning. I love that. I don't know if all shows, I just don't notice it, but I don't feel like many shows will put that entire breadth of the cast in the, like, obviously, they're all, recurring main cast contracted characters, but having them all in the title sequence is great. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, everyone gets their time to shine, and a
Yes.
lot of the episodes we picked are these spotlights on the B characters in the season too, and I like that. And then even the episode we picked with Morgan, even though he's the best friend and he kind of becomes a main character as the series goes on, I think they just do a really good job of fleshing everyone out, so they have the option of kind of bumping a character up if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. Like they gave a lot of flexibility in their writer's room to, okay, each one of these characters, we're going to make the most out of them and see what we can do with them as time goes on. And you do just see a lot of growth, even when it's just funny and kind of the comedic break.
Absolutely. Anything else on Chuck?
I think
you did it.
We're pretty good.
I think that was perfect. Yeah.
I think so.
That was this episode of Primetime Party Time. Ghosts of Primetime's Past. This time featuring Chuck, the NBC series. This show could not have been made without the following amazing people. Our artwork's by Fen. Catch her on Instagram.com/FenLatte. Our theme music is by Jay Wright. Catch him at jwrightmusic.com. Our website's by Coco, or is it D1012 tonight? Who knows? We're your hosts. That's
Tracy.
You and me, Daniel. And thank you, BMAC, for helping us put together this episode. Thank you for being here, listening wherever you're listening to your podcast, whether that's Apple, Spotify, wherever else we are. We're on iHeartRadio now, so that's fun. Get that email this week.
Yeah.
I didn't know that we weren't before,
Get that
but we
spread
are.
of streaming apps: Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio,
And
all that good stuff.
Catch us next week at ptptshow.com, Mondays, 9 p.m. Good show, Tracy?
Good show. I mean, how can we not watching Chuck? It's such a good time going back to that place.
You know, the creators said that they made that show with the intention to put a smile on the viewer's face.
So true. Not to just be